9 years after her daughter vanished, a mother plays a tape and hears the man who raised her. They say silence is just the absence of noise until you meet the kind that fills a house, the kind that hangs in the air like fog after grief, like breath held too long. This is not a story that begins with screaming. It begins with a light left on in a little girl's room, with a window slightly ajar, with a mother unlocking the door after a long shift, expecting to hear her child's sleepy murmur, and instead hearing nothing at all. Portland, October D1. The rain had finally let up, leaving the streets dark but slick, like glass laid over old pain. Lena Whitmore pulled into the driveway with a slow, exhausted motion. Her fingers, still red from hours in latex gloves, ached around the steering wheel. She didn't turn off the car right away, just sat there, eyes half closed, listening to the steady click of the engine cooling. It had been 16 hours on her feet at St. Vincent's, 14 patients, 3 emergencies, 1 death. But none of that stayed with her. What stayed was the thought of Emily, her 5-year-old, her heartbeat outside her body, probably curled up in bed now, in her My Little Pony pajamas, cheeks flushed with dreams. The idea of that, the safety of her daughter being home, asleep, waiting, was the single thing that kept Lena standing some days. She stepped out of the car, rain jacket flapping against her knees, and walked up the front steps. The porch light was on. Caleb had remembered then, a small grace. Inside, the house smelled like old toast and laundry. The hallway was still warm. She set her keys down softly, out of habit, not wanting to wake anyone. As she passed the living room, she noticed Caleb asleep on the couch, one arm draped over a closed book. His mouth was slightly open. He looked peaceful, in a way he rarely did when awake. The weight of everything had changed them, shifted their bones and shadows. But for now, Lena let him be. She moved upstairs, her fingers trailing the polished oak banister Caleb had installed himself when Emily was born. The house was quiet, but something in that quiet didn't sit right. A tension barely there, like the wrong note in a familiar song. She opened Emily's door slowly, careful not to wake her. The room was exactly as it had been when she'd left that morning. Pink walls with faded butterfly decals. A small white dresser with chipped corners. Stuffed animals lined neatly along the foot of the bed. But the bed was empty. Her breath caught. For a second, she thought maybe Emily had wandered to their bedroom. Or maybe she was in the bathroom. Maybe. Then she saw the window, wide open, curtains blowing like ghosts. Cold autumn air rushed in, brushing past her like someone trying to leave. Lena's legs moved before her brain did. She checked the closet, under the bed, the bathroom. She ran down the stairs, calling Emily's name in a voice that turned shrill with panic. Caleb woke, confused, stumbling after her. "What? What's happening?" he asked, grabbing her arm. "Emily's gone," Lena said. Her voice didn't even sound like her own. "She's not in her bed. The window is open." For a moment, Caleb just blinked. Then he ran upstairs, then downstairs, then outside. Neighbors were woken. Police were called. By dawn, floodlights cut through the backwoods behind their house. Dogs barked. Voices yelled. A helicopter buzzed low overhead. But nothing was found. No footprints, no blood, no broken lock. Just a child's open window and a room that had been frozen in time since the moment she disappeared. Lena didn't sleep for days. She sat in Emily's room at night, curled in the tiny pink armchair, clutching her daughter's favorite blanket to her chest like a second skin. Every creak of the house felt like a whisper. Every gust of wind felt like a clue. The police were thorough at first. They interviewed everyone, dug through closets, phone records, Caleb's workshop, Lena's hospital schedule. But as the weeks wore on, the news trucks left. Volunteers stopped calling, and the detectives stopped returning her voicemails. Grief came in strange forms. For Lena, it looked like action, overwork, overtime, triple shifts. If her body was exhausted, maybe her brain would stop replaying the moment she found the empty bed. For Caleb, it became silence. He quit his practice and retreated into the garage, started building things again, boxes, shelves, birdhouses he never put up. They still spoke, at first, about logistics, about media interviews, about what-ifs, but soon even those dried up. Words had lost their meaning in a house that echoed only with absence. Lena tried therapy. Caleb refused. Talking won't bring her back, he'd said once. But neither did silence. 2 years passed, then 4, then 8. Every year, on October 15th, Lena would stand at the foot of her daughter's empty bed, press 2 fingers to the glass of the photo frame, and whisper, "Happy birthday, baby. I'm still looking." When the divorce came, it wasn't explosive. It was tired. 2 people sitting across a table, dividing grief like furniture. Caleb kept the house. Lena moved into a 2-bedroom apartment closer to the hospital. They signed papers. No fight, just a quiet undoing. She kept telling herself, this is how endings look when love isn't lost in anger, but in sorrow. And then, 9 years later, she returned to pack the last of her things. It was strange, walking into that house again. The furniture was the same, the lighting, the smell. But it didn't feel like home. It felt like a museum, and every object whispered a different version of her former life. She moved methodically, boxing up old uniforms, framed diplomas, keepsakes from a world that had fallen out of orbit. Caleb helped. They didn't talk much, but there was no tension, just habit. Familiarity stripped of warmth. "I want to see her room," Lena said quietly. Caleb nodded, his face unreadable. "Take your time." She climbed the stairs. Her hand touched the banister again, and for the first time in years, she remembered the night Caleb finished staining it. How Emily had gotten paint on her nose, and they'd all laughed until their stomachs hurt. The door creaked open. Nothing had changed. It was all still there. The butterflies on the walls, the worn comforter, the faded unicorn pillow. Only the window had been altered, now sealed shut with bars bolted into the frame. She crossed the room slowly, the weight of years pressing into every step. She knelt by the bed and closed her eyes. For a moment, she imagined Emily sleeping there, her chest rising and falling, the sound of her breath steady in the silence. Lena kissed her fingers and touched them to the photo frame. "Goodbye, baby girl," she whispered. But as she stood to leave, Her eyes fell on a small cardboard box marked Emily's Favorites. And nestled inside, barely visible beneath plush toys and faded books, was something she hadn't seen in almost a decade: a red and white cassette recorder, still heavier than she remembered, still intact, still holding a voice she hadn't heard in 9 years. It was heavier than it looked. Strange how time does that to objects. Lena cradled the old cassette recorder in both hands as though it were something fragile. Not plastic, not wires, but memory. Her thumb traced the chipped edge of the red play button, its paint faded from years of small fingers pressing down in delight. She hadn't seen this thing since she didn't even know. Maybe days before Emily vanished, maybe longer. The edges of her vision swam, her body suspended in that moment where grief meets anticipation. Part of her didn't want to press it, because what if the tape had degraded? What if the batteries had leaked and corroded the inside? What if she pressed play and nothing came out? But the more terrifying possibility was that something would come out. She sat cross-legged on the floor, back against the dresser. The box beside her still overflowed with Emily's childhood: stuffed unicorns, worn pajamas, books with dog-eared pages, and faint stains from cracker crumbs. A thin film of baby shampoo still clung to the fabric, like time daring her to breathe it in. She turned the recorder over, flipped open the battery compartment, and found a crust of greenish corrosion from the old AAs. Her nurse instincts kicked in. She grabbed a tissue, cleaned the contacts gently, her fingers shaking as she worked. She found 2 fresh batteries in her desk drawer, leftover, perhaps, from her own remote control. They clicked into place with a sound far too loud for the silence of the room. Lena exhaled. She pressed play. A brief hiss of static. Then a pause. Then, like lightning in a quiet sky. Testing, testing. This is Emily Rose Whitmore, and I'm 5 years old. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just a voice. It was her. Bright, chirping, dancing between syllables, like skipping on a sidewalk. Lena closed her eyes. The room blurred away. She could see her again. Tangled blonde hair, missing front tooth, that striped shirt she wouldn't stop wearing, the way she used to narrate her whole life like she was hosting her own radio show. I had cheese for lunch, Emily went on, and Miss Kendall said I could be the butterfly in the spring play. Mommy, if you hear this, I love you. Oh, and I saw a real butterfly in the garden. It had blue wings. Lena laughed through tears. The sound was so real it hurt. She could almost feel Emily's breath against her neck. Her little arms wrapped around her waist, and for a split second, she let herself believe this was normal, that her daughter was in the next room. But then, the tone of the tape shifted. Static again. Then faint background noises, muffled footsteps, the creak of a door. Then a man's voice, Caleb's, clear as day. Emmy, come to the princess room when you're done. Remember what I promised. If you're good, we'll go to Toys R Us for that new My Little Pony. Lena blinked. Princess room? She replayed that part again. Slower. Caleb's tone was strange. Not the firm but warm bits he used when reading bedtime stories. Not the sing-song tone parents use to coax children into brushing their teeth. No. This voice had an edge of manipulation. Carefully sugar-coated, but calculated. A quiet lure. The princess room. Lena stood. the recorder still in her hand. Her mind whirred. Emily never liked princesses. She was into dinosaurs, dragons, and puppies. Caleb always tried to steer her toward more girl things, but it never stuck. And Toys R Us? They hadn't gone that day. She remembered. They'd been saving for a new water heater. They'd promised the trip next month. Something itched at the back of her brain. She rifled through the box, searching for that pink plastic figurine Emily had wanted. Never found it. No pony toys, no tiaras, just unicorns and books and worn pajamas. Perhaps Caleb hadn't packed them, or perhaps he hadn't wanted to. Lena sat back down, played the tape again, listened closer. Caleb's words weren't just casual. They were scripted, as if he knew this recording might live on, as if he was building a reality not just for Emily, but for anyone who might be listening later. He never referred to Emily's room as the princess room before, ever. So what was it? A game? A private nickname? Or was it something else? Her breath came short. She looked toward the staircase. Part of her wanted to call Caleb, ask him, demand answers. But what would that accomplish? They weren't together anymore. She'd spent years telling herself he'd grieved in his own way, that maybe their pain had just made them incompatible. But now it felt like maybe that pain hadn't been equal at all. Lena stood abruptly, unable to stay still. Her body needed movement. She paced through the house, her house, but no longer hers. She stepped into the guest room, opened the closet, looked behind old boxes. Nothing. No evidence of anything called princess room. Then her gaze fell on the filing cabinet in the corner. She'd forgotten about her nursing license renewal forms. The reason she came back in the first place. She pulled open the drawer. There they were, right where she always kept them. She flipped through them absent-mindedly, heart still tangled around that phrase from the tape. Princess room. A phrase that now echoed with menace. She glanced at the clock. 8:30 p.m. Her night shift started in 90 minutes. No time to spiral. She had to move. But her hand kept finding its way back to the recorder. Rewinding. Replaying. That voice. That promise. Her mind replayed it like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Caleb's voice. Measured. Soft. Too soft. If you're good, we'll go to Toys R Us. It was a bribe. That much was clear. But what was it buying? And why had it been recorded at all? She slipped the recorder into her purse, pressed her fingers to her temple, and tried to breathe. Her life had been wrapped in numbness for so long. Routine, survival, coping. But now something had cracked, and something was pouring out. Not rage, not fear, something worse. Recognition. She looked around the room one last time, and for the first time in years, she realized she might not have been living with the absence of a child, but with the presence of a lie. Lena's apartment was barely furnished. A couch from Goodwill. 2 bookshelves, mostly empty. A coffee table with a chipped corner she'd promised herself she'd sand down one day, but never had the energy to. That night, the place felt smaller than usual, like the walls had crept a few inches closer, like the air had thickened around her. She had made it to work, somehow. She'd smiled where she was supposed to smile, drawn blood with steady hands, comforted a patient whose oxygen was dropping, and answered a phone call from a dying man's daughter with more empathy than she felt she had left. But all night, the words looped in her head. Come to the princess room. She heard them over the beeping of monitors, over the hum of fluorescent lights, over her own voice, robotic from years of scripted medical empathy. By morning, her body moved on instinct. She drove home on autopilot, past her exit without realizing, and suddenly found herself pulling into the old driveway. She didn't remember deciding to come back. The sun was already high, casting long streaks of light across the roof Caleb once patched himself. His truck wasn't in the drive. A small, stupid relief. She didn't want to see him. Not yet. Not until she could name what it was she was feeling. This slow, rising dread that didn't quite qualify as fear, but hovered somewhere near it. She had called him once the night before. After listening to the tape again, he hadn't answered. She'd left a message, short, tight, polite. She didn't say what she found, just that she needed to stop by to look for some documents. He texted back that morning. Of course, use your key, lock up when you leave. That felt too easy. The house felt colder, though the thermostat blinked a comfortable 72. The silence wasn't the same kind she remembered. Not peaceful, not empty. It felt expectant. She headed to the bedroom first, collected the manila folder with her license and certification forms, double-checked the drawer. All there. Everything in order. Two in order. The bed was neatly made. The room stripped of anything personal. No photos. No glass of water by the nightstand. No laundry basket. Caleb's presence was there, but only in the structure, not in the life. She turned to leave, but her feet didn't follow. Instead, she wandered, slowly, like a ghost, revisiting a place it once called home. Her hands moved across the walls, the familiar textures. The stain on the baseboard where Emily once spilled juice, and they'd laughed so hard they forgot to clean it for days. Still there, but everything else had changed. She was halfway down the stairs when her phone buzzed in her back pocket. She checked the screen. Voicemail. From the landline. From the house. She blinked, looked up. She hadn't heard it ring. Her chest tightened. She pressed play on speaker. A soft click. Then a woman's voice. Concerned. Familiar. Caleb, this is Dr. Jansen. I need you to call me back as soon as possible. You've missed 3 group therapy sessions. That's 3 weeks, Caleb. The group is worried. I'm worried. Please call. Lena froze. Her stomach flipped. He said he was going to therapy. He always said that. Every Tuesday night, for 5 years, that's where he told her he was. But Dr. Jansen's voice was too clear, too direct, too honest. He had lied. Not once. Repeatedly. For weeks. Her hand gripped the stair railing tighter. Part of her brain fired through excuses. Maybe he was embarrassed. Maybe he'd quit, but hadn't told anyone. But the words sounded hollow even as they formed. 3 missed sessions. 3 Tuesdays unaccounted for. 3 nights he could have been anywhere. She opened her contacts and called him. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Lena? His voice was breathy, as if startled or caught mid-sentence. Everything okay? She steadied herself. kept her tone light. I just realized I forgot to say thank you for letting me come by. A pause. Of course. Not a problem. You said you were at therapy? A beat. Longer this time. Yes, he said too quickly. Actually, on the way there now. Picked up Miles. He lives far. We're running a bit late. Lena felt the words curve inside her like a bad note on a piano. Too specific, too eager. That's good, she said gently. Group matters, especially now. Yeah, it really helps. Why do you ask? There it was. The shift. The why do you ask, not in curiosity, but in calculation. She chose silence for a second too long. I just heard the answering machine, she said finally. Dr. Jansen left a message. Another pause. She's very strict about attendance, Caleb offered, with a thin laugh. I've just been late a few times. Maybe that's what she meant. Lena didn't reply. Her fingers clenched around the phone, knuckles whitening. Nothing serious, he added quickly. I'll talk to her. Of course, she whispered. Talk soon, Caleb. She ended the call before he could answer. And for the first time in nearly a decade, Lena felt afraid of him. The voice on the tape, the made-up room, the sudden obsession with woodworking, the lies. Something inside her cracked. She grabbed her purse and keys, ready to leave, but then remembered the hardware store. She turned the ignition, drove 3 blocks, pulled into the parking lot of Harrison's Hardware. The familiar jingle sounded as she entered. Lena Whitmore! George, the owner's son, looked up from behind the counter. Good to see you. She nodded stiffly. Just need some shims. Wardrobe's leaning. Aisle 3, he pointed. Then, almost casually, how's Caleb's new project coming? She froze. Project? The hobby room, George replied. He was in here just last weekend. Said he's finally building that space he always talked about. Bought half the store, plywood, nails, finish, even new power tools. Lena's blood ran cold. We don't have any project, she said slowly. George frowned. Huh, that's odd. He seemed excited, said it was a long time coming. Lena forced a smile, thanked him, paid for the shims, and walked out without another word. Inside the car, she sat motionless. The bag crinkled beside her. Her breath fogged the windshield. Caleb had lied, again. And not just about therapy, not just about where he'd been, but about what he'd been building and why. She looked at the keys in her hand, felt their weight, remembered how once they'd opened every door in her life, but now they pointed to only one. And whatever lay behind it was waiting. The light was beginning to dim by the time Lena pulled into the driveway for the second time that week. She told herself she was here to fix the wardrobe, that it was just about the shims, about finishing what she started. But the truth clung to her like the humid summer air wrapping around her neck. She needed to look again, needed to feel something shift, something give. The key slid into the front door without resistance. Inside, the house greeted her with the stillness of a place no longer lived in, only visited. As if it had become a stage set, familiar walls, staged furniture, but the heartbeat was gone. She passed through the living room, up the stairs, and into Emily's bedroom without hesitation. The room looked different now, not because anything had changed, but because everything had. She scanned the space. Pink walls, child-sized bed with the My Little Pony comforter, dresser. Shelves now partially empty since she'd packed the box labeled Emily's Favorites. But it was the wardrobe that caught her attention. It stood awkwardly, leaning slightly to the left, as if caught in the act of shifting when no one was looking. She approached it, placed a hand on its side. It wobbled. One leg clearly didn't touch the floor. She crouched down, slid a shim under the uneven foot. But as she pressed against the side to steady it, the entire thing shifted, then lurched. In that frozen half-second before it toppled, Lena's mind flashed to the dozens of times Emily had opened it, pulled out costumes, spun in front of its mirror. How many times had she warned her to be careful? And now it was falling, not toward a child, but toward the truth. With a groaning crash, the wardrobe tipped forward and hit the floor. The sound was louder than it should have been, too loud. The floor beneath gave way, splintering like a mouth forced open. Lena stepped back instinctively, shielding her face from the dust and broken wood. When it cleared, she saw it, a ragged opening in the floorboards, jagged planks peeled back like skin, and inside, boxes, neatly stacked, untouched by time. She dropped to her knees, heart pounding, reached down and pulled one up. It was heavier than it looked. She opened the lid and gasped. Tapes. Dozens of VHS cassettes, carefully labeled, written in Caleb's handwriting. Princess Suite, Volume 11, in. Princess Suite, Volume 42, in. Princess Suite, Volume 119, in. Each one numbered, each one bearing the same cryptic title. Her fingers trembled as she reached for a second box, the same labels, a third, identical. She counted 4 full crates. Her lungs refused to fill properly. The silence of the house was no longer still. It was waiting. Her mind screamed at her to run, to call someone, anyone. Instead, she stood and stumbled back toward the stairs, needing air, needing space. That's when she heard it, a sound, downstairs. Not creaking, not the settling of old wood, something deliberate. Movement. She froze at the top of the stairs, straining to listen. Footsteps. Then the sound of a drawer being yanked open. Someone was in the house. Her mouth went dry. Slowly, silently, she descended the stairs. One step at a time, she reached the hallway. The office door was half open. Light spilled into the hall from beneath it. She crept closer. Then, Caleb? No answer. She pushed the door open. Her breath caught. It wasn't Caleb. It was Miles. Standing in the middle of the room, sweating, panicked, surrounded by chaos. Drawers pulled out, folders dumped, the floor littered with paper and open boxes. He turned to face her. His eyes were wide, unfocused, his clothes disheveled, hair stuck up in damp tufts. His skin had a strange, pale sheen. "Miles?" Lena said, her voice catching on fear. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer. He took a step toward her. Caleb said I could. He told me where they were. He said if I found the right one." His words spilled out too fast, slurred. There was something off, a chemical glaze behind his pupils. "You're not well," she said, slowly backing away. "You need help." "I'm fine." His voice cracked. "I just need the tapes. Just the right ones. They're mine," he promised. Lena's hand reached behind her blindly, searching for something, anything, solid. Miles, listen to me. This isn't you. Whatever Caleb said, he lied. You don't want to do this. His face twisted, confused, ashamed. Then, anger. He lunged. She screamed, dodged sideways, felt his hand graze her shoulder. She ran down the hall. He chased her. She veered back into Emily's room, slipped on the floor, barely kept her balance. He grabbed her arm and spun her, shoving her against the wall. Pain exploded through her back. She fell to her knees, and the wardrobe, already unstable, teetered again, crashed beside her with a force that shook the floor. And then something else gave. The hidden floor space caved in further. And suddenly, the hole revealed even more. Beneath the wood, a larger cavity, filled with boxes, not just VHS tapes, discs, VCDs, burned DVDs, labeled, dated, numbered, hundreds. Miles saw them. His eyes lit up with something feral. This is it, he whispered. This is what I was looking for. He dropped to his knees, began grabbing handfuls of tapes like they were treasure, stuffed them into his jacket, into a backpack. He laughed, high-pitched, unhinged. Lena stared, paralyzed. Then something inside her snapped. No. She reached forward, knocked tapes from his grip, screaming for him to stop. He shoved her back with one hand, bolted out of the room, thundering down the stairs. She chased after him. Too late. The front door slammed. Through the window, she saw him sprint down the driveway, tapes clutched tight against his chest. He didn't look back. Lena stood in the center of her old living room, panting, shaking, her arms burning where he'd grabbed her. Her mind couldn't catch up with what her eyes had just seen. The banged-up hole in the floor, the hundreds of tapes, the words on every label, Princess Suite, volumes, hundreds. Her mouth went dry. What was on them? Why had they been hidden? And how long had this been here? She turned, walked slowly back up the stairs, into the room. Her knees gave as she knelt by the broken floor. She reached down and pulled a tape from the pile. Princess Suite, Volume 47 in, same label, same script, same lie. Her hand reached for her phone. Her voice broke as she dialed. 911. What's your emergency? She stared at the tape in her hand. I need the police, she said. A man just broke in. He attacked me. And he took things. What did he take, ma'am? She looked down again. Tapes. There are still hundreds left. He didn't get them all. But I think, her voice trembled, I think they're about my daughter. The sirens came first, distant, pulsing, drawing closer with every heartbeat. Red and blue light splashed across the darkened windows, illuminating the dust floating in the air like suspended time. Lena sat on the floor of her daughter's room, knees drawn to her chest, one hand still gripping the VHS tape as if it could anchor her in place. Two officers entered first, flashlights cutting across the broken wardrobe, the torn carpet, the raw wooden wound in the floor. Their shoes crunched on splinters. One of them, older, in plain clothes, paused when he saw her. Ma'am, are you Lena Whitmore? She nodded. Her voice had long since dried up. He crouched beside her, hands steady but eyes watchful. I'm Detective Morrison. Can you tell me what happened? And so she did. The attack, the man she knew as Miles, the tapes, the cavity under the floorboards, the phrase, the princess room. He listened without interruption, his eyes growing more alert with each word. When she mentioned Emily, when she said she had been missing for 9 years, something in his posture changed. Like a line had been crossed, from burglary to something far worse. More officers arrived, evidence techs. They sealed the room, bagged the tapes, cataloged labels, took photos from every angle. The words child exploitation material whispered from one uniform to another like a contagion. Then came the moment. Morrison asked, "Could your daughter still be in this house?" Lena blinked. "What?" He repeated the question. She tried to speak, but the answer had no words. Her breath hitched. Her hands began to shake. "There's a basement," she finally said. "Always locked. Caleb said it was where he kept his tools. Only he had the key. I never questioned." Her voice broke. Morrison stood. "That's enough for a warrant. We're opening it." It happened fast. Crowbars, a battering ram, 3 hard blows. The reinforced door cracked, then shattered inward with a crash that echoed like thunder through the house. The staircase beyond descended into shadow. Lena stood at the top, barely able to breathe. Morrison led the team down. Flashlights flickered. Dust hung in the air. Then, click, the basement lights flared to life, humming with fluorescent static. The room was organized, disturbingly so. Pegboards with tools, labeled bins, workbenches. Nothing looked out of place, but that was the problem. It was too perfect. "Check everything," Morrison ordered. Officers moved like chess pieces. They tapped on walls, lifted shelves, peeled back rugs, measured seams in the drywall. Lena followed them down slowly, every step pressing weight into her chest. Her eyes scanned the room, but it was just Caleb, his meticulousness, his sterile odor. Until one officer called out, "Over here, behind the washer." They dragged it aside. Then the dryer. Behind them, a wall panel, slightly misaligned. A tiny error. Enough. Morrison ran his hand along the edge, found a latch, tried it. Locked. Someone handed him a crowbar. Metal shrieked against wood. Then a snap. The panel swung inward with a hiss of stale air. Behind it, a narrow corridor, dim and silent. Strips of disconnected pink fairy lights lined the ceiling like a child's fever dream. And then the smell. Damp. Synthetic. Something else. Human. Stale. Lena pressed her sleeve to her mouth. Morrison plugged in the lights. The hallway lit up in soft, saccharine pink. The end of the tunnel was painted with murals, castles, ponies, rainbows, a door, painted pink, stickers peeling along the edges. One said, "Magic Princess Land." Morrison knocked. "Police, open the door." Silence. He pressed his ear against the door. Nothing. He raised his hand again, but this time a soft click sounded from inside. The door creaked open, and standing in the doorway was a girl, blonde, pale, 14, maybe 15, in a nightgown far too small, hair tangled to her waist, eyes too wide, too empty. Her lips parted. She blinked at the flashlights, at the badges. Her expression flickered. Fear, confusion, then horror. "You're not my dad," she whispered. Morrison stepped back slowly. "Emily?" The girl flinched, Lena pushed forward. She saw her. Not just the face, but the eyes, the dimple on the left cheek, the tiny scar on the chin from the time she fell in the driveway. Time had changed her, but Lena knew her daughter like the inside of her own breath. "It's me," she choked. "Emily, it's Mom." The girl stepped back. "No, no, that's not. Daddy said you died. He said everyone died. There was a war. He said the world ended." Lena shook her head, tears running unchecked. "It didn't. None of it. He lied to you. I'm here. I never stopped looking. I didn't know, Emily. I didn't know." She reached into her pocket, pulled out a pen. Kneeling, she drew a small butterfly on her hand with a smiley face in the middle, the same way she had over and over when Emily was 5, the happy butterfly. "Remember this?" she whispered. "You used to ask me to draw it again every time it faded. You said it kept nightmares away." The girl's breath caught. Her eyes locked on the drawing. Her lip quivered. "Mommy?" That one word cracked the room in two. She ran, fell into Lena's arms, and Lena clutched her like she was being reborn through skin and tears. Behind them, the room blinked in soft pink light. A bed, toys, a tripod, a small TV, VCR, coloring books, and in a far drawer, things too dark to describe. Things Morrison would find, bag, document, and later testify about in a courtroom. But right now, there was only this: Emily, alive, held in arms that had never let her go. "I thought I was the last person left," Emily whispered. "He said I had to have a baby, that we were rebuilding the world." Lena's whole body shook. "No," she said, barely more than air. "That wasn't love. What he did to you wasn't love. But I'm here now, and you're safe." Emily pulled back slightly, stared at her mother's face, then at the officers, at the world suddenly wider than the 4 walls she had known. "Can we go home?" she asked softly. Lena kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby," she whispered. "We're going home." The waiting room at the police station smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Emily sat beside Lena on a faded orange bench, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She hadn't said much since they left the house, since the ambulance ride, since the soft-voiced female paramedic asked gentle questions about her health, about her periods, about where she felt pain. She just kept repeating the same sentence, like she was still convincing herself, "You're not dead." Lena kept her arm around her, didn't ask for more. There was no room in this moment for explanations. Only presence. Only warmth. Detective Morrison returned after an hour with a calm but tired look. "We've located Caleb Whitmore and Miles Corrin," he said quietly. "They were apprehended at 3542 Riverside Drive, just a few minutes from here." Lena blinked. "Together?" Morrison nodded. "Not just them. There were 6 officers. We believe it was a meeting. Sharing media, possibly producing more." He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. Lena's hand instinctively pulled Emily closer. "They called it the Everlight Circle," Morrison continued. "A group of men trading in materials like what we found in your house. Some of the tapes were recorded years ago. Some more recent." Lena's stomach turned. Emily remained quiet, but her eyes moved now, watching, listening. "I want to see him," Lena said. Morrison hesitated. "He's being processed, interviewed. There's no legal reason you have to." "I want to." He nodded once. A few minutes later, Lena stood behind a one-way glass panel looking into the interrogation room. Caleb sat at the metal table in handcuffs, his shoulders relaxed, his expression unreadable. Two detectives sat across from him. They weren't raising their voices. They didn't need to, because Caleb was talking. Freely, almost proudly. "I started building the room in '89, he was saying. Finished it 6 months before she turned 5. It had to be perfect. It was our space." One of the detectives leaned forward. "Why?" Caleb smiled faintly. "She was mine. I made her. Why wouldn't I keep her? The world outside didn't deserve her." Lena's throat closed. "She never cried," Caleb added. "Not really. She accepted it, understood. We had a routine. We were starting again, rebuilding. She was supposed to carry on the line." The detective paused. "You mean get pregnant?" Caleb nodded. "And you think that's okay?" He looked up, shrugged. "It was consensual. She loved me, still does." Lena stepped back from the glass. She couldn't hear anymore. This wasn't grief. This wasn't mental illness. This wasn't trauma in disguise. This was evil. Cold, practiced, deliberate. Back in the hallway, Morrison caught up with her. "We raided the Riverside house, found tapes playing, found cameras. They were watching one when we entered. She didn't ask what was on it. She already knew." "Why now?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Why did it fall apart tonight?" Morrison looked down at his notes. Miles. He turned desperate, obsessed with Emily. He wanted what Caleb had: status, control. He couldn't find her, so he went for the next best thing: the tapes. He wanted them, needed them. Thought if he could possess the footage, he could step into Caleb's place. He shook his head, disgusted. He didn't expect you to be there. Didn't expect you to fight back. Lena closed her eyes. 9 years of numbness had ended in a single swing of a ceramic nightlight. Later, she was reunited with Emily in the corridor. The girl clung to her mother's arm, but didn't speak. A social worker with kind eyes asked gently if Emily could answer a few more questions at the hospital. Lena nodded. They were escorted outside through a rear exit to avoid the crowd forming out front. Reporters, flashing cameras, curious neighbors. The flashing lights of the police cruisers painted everything in red and blue, like sirens from a different life. Inside the van, Emily finally spoke. "I thought I was helping him save the world," she whispered. Lena didn't respond. She just wrapped her arms around her. "I feel stupid." "No, sweetheart. You were a child. You believed someone who was supposed to protect you. That's not your shame. It's his." Emily turned her face into Lena's shoulder. "Do people hate girls like me?" Lena's voice broke. "No, not if they have any heart. And if they do, they don't matter." Silence again. Then Emily whispered, "I don't want to be in a pink room ever again." Lena held her tighter. "You'll choose your next room, and the next, and the next, I promise you." At the hospital, they took blood, samples, scans. The doctors said little, but their eyes said enough. Emily was physically stable. The rest, the trauma, the disorientation, the deep confusion of a girl raised in isolation and deceit, would take years. Lena sat beside her the whole time, and when the nurse asked about therapy, about plans, about the next steps, Lena answered without hesitation, "Everything. We'll do all of it. She's not alone." Later, back at the station, Morrison handed her a folder. Inside, Caleb's confession, Miles's statement, and a partial list of other suspected members of the ring. Investigations would take months, maybe years. More victims would be found, more evidence, more hearings. But this chapter was closed. That night, as Lena and Emily curled on the couch of the safe house they'd been offered, Lena asked softly, "Do you want to draw? Just for you?" Emily nodded. She picked up a pencil, opened a blank page, and slowly, without rushing, she drew a sky. Not a castle, not a tiara, just sky, open, wide, blue. She looked up at her mother. "This time," she said, "I want windows that don't lock." Lena kissed the top of her head. "And this time," she whispered, "no one ever gets to close them on you again." The shadows were still out there, but now so was she.